All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to the CX Chronicles podcast. Super excited for today's show as we are welcoming Michael Loban to the podcast. Michael, thank you for joining us, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. Glad to be here.
So, folks, we've got a good one because Michael is the chief growth officer at a really cool company called InfoTrust, based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And Michael's going to share with us today his customer focused business leadership journey, and he's going to chat with us about all the cool things that are happening over at InfoTrust. So, Michael, I'll turn the microphone over to you, sir. Why don't you take a couple minutes to give us your elevator pitch around how you got into this entire world of understanding customer analytics and customer data and making sense of it each and every day.
Absolutely. So I got into this field about 10 years ago. And now every discussion about digital marketing tends to include digital analytics. But 10 years ago, it actually wasn't the case. 10 years ago, majority of the discussions were on social media. That was what was hot, if you will. And website analytics, website experimentation, first-party data was obviously a concern for organizations, but wasn't something that everyone was paying as much attention to as they are right now. Today, it's hard to find an executive that is not prioritizing first-party data, their corporate data strategy, and is working on analytics strategy, testing and experimentation strategy. And that's in many ways what InfoTrust helps these organizations accomplish. Predominantly, we work with Fortune 500 companies, large enterprises in retail, consumer packaged goods, news and media space. But we've also, throughout this journey, have worked with small to medium-sized organizations, and things that we're going to cover today can really be applicable to organizations of any size.
I love it. That sounds fantastic. And I think, Michael, as you and I were chatting about last week, it's like this day and age, all of the data and the customer information that any company is collecting, it really truly can be used as a modern fuel or a modern energy, where if you know how to put it through the engine or put it through the right type of process, you can get some ridiculously beneficial results for any company of any shape or size.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And there's a common belief that just because it's fairly easy for us to collect data about consumers, that we know what to do with that information. It's not always the case.
No way. Exactly. Yeah. It's funny too. And having a fresh set of eyes and a fresh perspective looking at it can make a world of difference oftentimes.
Absolutely. And, the example that I often think about is during the past couple of months as COVID hit and being home a lot more, not having to travel, I attempted a couple of times to go through the recipe book and try making a couple of fancier dishes than my regular ones. And as I was looking at it, you have your cookbook, you have your list of ingredients, and it tells you exactly what to do, how many cups of water to use, how many for how long to keep the dish in the oven and whatnot. But somehow, although the ingredients are the same, I still get very different results, right? It doesn't taste, for whatever reason, just as good. And so the question then becomes, well, is it really as different than data strategy, right? Yes, we have access to analytics. Yes, we have, if you will, the raw ingredients, but why are some organizations so successful with analytics and other organizations are not very successful, just like me with cooking? And to answer some of those questions, we recently wrote a book that was just published that became Amazon bestseller.
Awesome.
Crawl, Walk, Run, and how organizations can advance their digital analytics maturity with Google Marketing Platform.
That's awesome. Number one, congratulations on the book, sir. That's fantastic
Thank you.
news. Number two, just talk about a space that is just, again, number one, it's so ripe for business owners and executives across the world to have a place or have a partner that they can really kind of lean on when it comes to getting into the weeds and how they want to expand their analytics strategy. The other thing too is, there's just so many companies out there, specifically some of the smaller, medium-sized companies that you guys are working with that could be growing so rapidly that keeping a pulse on which data views or which data fields or which data cuts make the most sense or give the biggest bang for your buck to business. That can be tricky. And why don't you take a couple minutes to talk about what made you guys want to write Crawl, Walk, Run, and what made you want to put all those ideas and all those learnings and findings into book form?
Sure. So what got us thinking about the book is every time we meet these enterprises and we talk about their digital strategy, there is always a question. We've done already so much, right? But we are not quite there yet. So it became interesting for us to determine, well, what is there, right? And how do you advance there? The other set of conversations would always be, well, we are just scratching the surface, we need to crawl before we run, if you will.
Sure.
And the idea of the book was, well, maybe we need to build a more structure towards this. Maybe in order to help any organization advance in anything, we need to build, if you will, a set of phases. Here is what defines your phase right now. Here is what the next phase is. Here's what the next phase is. Here's what the next phase is. And here's how you progress across the phases. And the idea was, I can certainly do this presentation 100 times, and a lot of times that's what I still do. Or I can really put this into a book and share it with more organizations. And some organizations we might never get to work with. It just might not be the right fit, might not be the right partnership, but I still want to share this knowledge with those organizations, with those marketers. And hence how we came up with the book. And hopefully a very much distilled down view to help marketers understand, again, where they are and where they're going.
Yep. I love it. I think that's huge, man. I think number one, it's just such a great way of giving back to a whole space that you've spent so much of your career getting to know so well and really practicing your craft on each and every day and all the different companies you've been a part of. But then the other thing too is there is this big piece of which for many folks that don't even know where to begin with thinking about how they can scratch the surface of better understanding their data, you have an incredible opportunity and an incredible medium in the book to be able to give them a highlight and give them an overview of all the different ways and spaces that a company like InfoTrust can come in and really kind of help optimize for the future. So with that being said, Michael, I'd love to jump into the first CX pillar of team. Why don't you take a couple minutes to tell the CX Nation about the team over at InfoTrust? Give us a sense for how the team's built, how you've kind of gone about thinking about what different types of roles you need on the pitch to be able to kind of play the game. Give us a sense for what that looks like.
So the team at InfoTrust?
Yes.
Sure. So there's obviously a big behind the scenes team that keeps the engine running, such as finance, such as legal counsel and others, operations, if you will.
Yep.
But predominantly when we engage with our partners, so with our clients, we have three teams that are part of our delivery structure. One is digital analytics platforms. So this is the team that helps organizations implement digital analytics platforms such as Google Analytics.
Okay.
Might be implementation of A/B testing platforms such as Google Optimize or Optimizely. And the job of the team is ensuring that not just the platform is implemented, but their job is to make sure that once the platform is implemented, organization is well positioned to actually use this.
Yep.
I'm a big proponent of establishing a routine of using analytics. And what I mean by that is, we use exercise as an example.
Yep.
Right? Yes, it's great to buy all the equipment. That's the step one. Step two is, okay, maybe you're going to exercise once every few weeks to kind of feel good about yourself. That's a great step, right? But you really become to notice those changes in your physiology, in your body, when you have this daily or weekly routine. And on Mondays, you do this, on Tuesday, you do this, on Wednesday, you do this. This is when you really start to go through the transformation.
Yep.
And our goal is within our own organizations and with our partners is to use these digital analytics platforms and help our partners to build this type of routine where they know this is how I'm using these dashboards. This is how I'm using these new digital analytics platforms to make my day-to-day decisions.
Love it.
The other team is our data engineering, data science team. And their job is really how do we integrate different platforms together, right? How do we accomplish this beautiful data set that then we can apply and do things like customer lifetime value, right? So how do we actually segment our users or segment our customers based on all the data that we have about them? And our third team that is part of Deliver is customer data governance.
Okay.
And customer data governance helps organizations ensure that the collection of data about their consumers is done in a proper, compliant way. And now with GDPR, the CCPA, e-privacy, and other new regulations, it's one of the busiest teams that we have, because everyone is trying to figure out, right, how do we translate those legal requirements that are coming at us to what we need to be doing on a technical basis. So that's on a kind of delivery side. And then we also have our client success team, and their job is to make sure that every partner that we work with is absolutely thrilled about the engagement. They are the happiness people, if you will. That's really what they do, is ensuring that all of the projects have a very high NPS.
That's awesome. That's
not
great.
promoter score.
Yep, I love it. So really, really well positioned team, and clearly have very thoughtfully laid out roles that have specific contributions to the overall customer journey. I think that's huge. I love that you were highlighting the data governance piece too. For many of our listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with what this looks like, when your startup or when your business gets to a certain place or a certain space when you're dealing with a tremendous amount of volume of data and you're collecting lots and lots and lots of customer feedback, you absolutely have to have an internal champion on your data science or on your analytics team who is constantly thinking about what is the hygiene and the cleanliness of that data. Is it being collected in the type of fashion that makes sense? Does it fit in with the way that you've been collecting it over a specific timeline, whether it's the last year, the last 2 years, whatever it might look like? Love that you called that out, because that's one piece that I think for some of our listeners who are still growing their businesses, this is something that they might not be thinking about, and they might be shifting or kind of like on the fly changing the way that they're collecting, because that's great. You're being swift, you're being agile,
Sure.
but you're right. You really got to be thoughtful around what types of changes you make, or you got to be really, really good at putting, we like to say kind of like a flag in the sand on when you make a major collection shift, so that when you're looking at data over a specific time, you can see when some of those changes have been made, and at least you can be thoughtful around what the collection methodology was at that time. Again, all these great ideas go into the data governance concept.
And one of the things to point out, especially as the organization continues to grow, is a certain change in how you collect data, right? Or even if you have an issue with data hygiene, it's not just the data that is being impacted, but all of your downstream systems.
Yep.
Right? And in a large organizations, when that happens, you're almost guaranteed that at some point you will have to stand in the room in front of your executives. They're going to be showing them a dashboard or a chart, and then you're going to explain, and this is why, or this is when this happened.
Yes.
Right? And there will be a question. So why did we have this unusual drop, or why did the numbers go up so high? And you kind of it's not a good place to be in when you have to explain, and by the way, yep, this is what happened. There is a big asterisk, and because of that, the emails that we had to send out were possibly impacted. The text messaging that we had to do had to be impacted. The display advertising campaign, all of these downstream systems and all of your campaigns are now impacted because the data that you collected maybe was not done properly, or something has happened that impacted the hygiene. Yep. Not to mention that if you collected data that you were not allowed or you were not authorized to collect about customers, that's a huge other big risk.
Yep, no, that makes perfect sense, and definitely never a fun seat to be sitting in when you're the guy or the gal who's got to explain the asterisks. And for some reason, nobody ever wants to move forward from that slide. You can never just push forward. Everyone's always got a million questions on the why and the who and the when. And so it's always a fun one to get into. Michael, I'd love to talk a little bit about tools and get into the second process. You've already talked a little bit about dashboards. You talked a little bit about integrating or aggregating different data sets to be able to show one different picture. Can you spend a little bit of time talking about some of the tools that InfoTrust and you and your team are using when you're working with some of your customers and your clients?
Sure. So if we talk about platforms, right? Uh, the key for us and when we work with our partners is simplification. And especially if a number of our listeners work at a smaller to medium-sized companies, doing an integration between 3 or 4 or 5 point solutions is just going to be very expensive.
Yep.
So my recommendation is always go with what is easy, not necessarily free, but easier for you to implement and execute on.
Yep.
From the technology platform, we use quite a bit the Google Marketing Platform, which includes tools like Google Analytics or a paid version of Analytics 360. And if you have a website, really the key things that you need to have from my standpoint is you need to have an analytics solution just so you understand what is happening on your website. I highly recommend a testing tool such as Google Optimizer, which is part of the Google stack, or you can use something Optimizely. If you, for example, sell professional services, you need a CRM platform.
Yep.
And the CRM platform that ideally is tied to email marketing, right? And I think just those pillars, if executed well, can accomplish more for your business than buying into 10 or 15 different platforms that are going to be kind of put into this Frankenstein of a digital stack.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
The other thing to keep in mind, and what often organizations don't, I think, realize is, yes, let's say there is a solution that you can buy for $99 a month, so $199 a month, which is, let's say, not that expensive, but the amount of time that it's going to take you to master it and use it, or that you will need to hire somebody to use it, there are other costs associated with it.
Sure.
So that's why my typical advice is invest in analytics solution. And Google Analytics is free. So really what you need to invest in is either upskill yourself or get somebody on your team who can help you make sense of data. And I'm a huge proponent of experimentation. So having a testing solution is very important. And when I talk about testing, a lot of times we hear, well, how do you do testing on a website that does not get a lot of visitors, right? Well, by testing, I do not necessarily mean run A/B test or check the color of the button submit to see does red convert better than green. By testing, I mean having a mindset where you determine, can I test something out? For example, on my website, can I say, if I get 100 people to sign up for my newsletter, I'm launching my newsletter, right? In a sense, that's also a test, because why create a newsletter, spend so much time on putting it together if you actually don't have that many people that are interested in a newsletter or in a newsletter in the typical format?
Yep.
You can even play with some business models, for example, subscription service. Do I need to launch a subscription service, or can I test out a promotion and, for example, give 25% off to people that say I'm interested in subscription service, and then I can launch this?
Yep.
So my recommendation is, if you have a hypothesis, right, here's what I want to do as a business for my customers, is determine what is the minimum viable product that you can bring to the market just to see their response, and then you can properly adapt.
Yep. I think that's awesome advice. And I think that it is spot on. There's oftentimes you hear so many stories of specifically business owners or maybe startup founders who are over engineering or overbuilding before simply understanding, wait a minute, is there even a need, or is there even demand, or is there even the ability to convert the demand so that, like, maybe somebody didn't know exactly what that problem was, but just by a 30-second or 60-second or 90-second pitch, you get to say, oh yeah, I do have all those problems. So yeah, let me hear more about the solutions you have for it. You're right. People spend way too much time overbuilding on these things instead of simply getting MVPs out to market, sharing them with as many different types of ideal customer profiles or ICPs as possible, and really thinking about funnel conversion and interest. Because if you don't have it, you do not need to worry about all the other things. You don't need to worry about the engineering of their overbuilding, because if there's no demand, no need to even think about some of those items.
And Adrian, to kind of build on what you're saying, because it's so important, a lot of times, especially entrepreneurs, they tend to fall in love with their product and service
Yeah,
versus falling in love with their customer,
right.
right? This is what we need to change. And I get when I get invited to speak at a panel or I present at different conferences, I get to hear this, but my product is so amazing, it does this.
Yeah,
Sometimes I also participate in, when somebody is pitching a product or a service and they hear them speak, it's so clear they put a lot of work, blood, sweat, and tears into that, and I get it, right? But you are not necessarily seeing it from the perspective of your customer.
yeah,
So you have to really understand that from their side, because unless you do that, yes, you still might end up being successful, but chances are it's going to be a lot more challenging, because you're doing, if you will, push, right? You're pushing your product, you're pushing your ideas onto your audience instead of pull, instead of knowing, hey,
yep.
I know exactly what they love. I've asked them and I continuously ask them, and now I'm giving it to them.
Yep. Yep. I love it. So, okay, we've talked about team, we've talked about tools, we've talked a lot about how process intertwines all those things. I would love to pick your brain, Michael, on the fourth CX pillar, feedback. So, in my career, one of the biggest gains or one of the biggest value adds that I was able to bring to many of the business was being able to leverage what the customer feedback data was saying in the types of ways where I could tell a story for either the executive leadership team that I was working for, or better yet, the team of customer facing people that I was managing, leading, or going into battle with each and every day. And I think that as I got further and further into my career, being able to tell that story a bit better about some of the major great things about the business that customers are fanatical about and they love about your business, versus some of the things that are really rough and they did not like about your business and would likely either lead to churn or lead to lower retention rates, or in the worst case scenario, lead to diminishing sales. Can you take a couple minutes to talk about some of the things that you and the team at InfoTrust really kind of do to collect, leverage, and
Sure.
use customer feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. As a data company, we absolutely obsess about customer feedback, right? And there are a couple of ways we really collect. And let's break this down, right? So let's
Sure.
first talk about collection. Right? So, on one hand, obviously, we have our own website where when people come to the website, when people download different resources, it helps us understand what the people are interested in. A lot of times, we also send out surveys to our customers or to our mailing list, just simply asking them, hey, what type of content, what type of information would be valuable to you? Uh, but outside of just doing it virtually online, with many of our partners, clients, we do quarterly business planning sessions.
Okay.
And that's when we collect a lot of their feedback. And outside of just asking, hey, how is the partnership going, right? We ask questions. Tell us, what other products are you looking in the space?
Yep.
Tell us what publications you're reading right now. Tell us if you have any favorite thought leaders, right? We are really trying to understand the context.
Okay.
So that's how we collect data. And we also, on some annual basis, we do NPS, so
Okay.
Net Promoter Score.
Yep.
And now we've been doing it for a couple of years, and now NPS is always upwards of 70, which
Oh,
is best in
nice.
class. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's how we collect information. Now, when we analyze information, one is, we always are looking at trends. Even having high NPS, we always ask ourselves a question, well, how do we continue improve it, right? Even when we look, I love this question when people ask me, so what is a good conversion rate on a website? Well, the only good conversion rate on the website is the one that increases every single day, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be looking at trend analysis. We need to be looking at the context. What else is going on there? That's why when I personally meet with a lot of our partners, I ask so many questions about what do you see in the industry? What keeps you up at night? What books are you reading? What trends are here to stay? I want to understand not just what they are doing day to day, but what they're paying attention to, because this gives me a perspective of what they are looking or going to be looking to do over the next 3 to 6 to 9 months.
Yep. Yep.
And then when we do it, obviously we as a team meet on regular basis. Some meetings happen. We have a daily sales and marketing stand up. So some of the feedback will be analyzed, even looked at on those. Some data points we review on weekly or monthly basis. And then obviously we have quarterly planning sessions where we determine here's what the priority is for this quarter. And then we report to the whole organization about here's what everyone has done towards those goals for the next quarter. One of the things about data to make sure that kind of people pay attention to is having data does not mean that you need to be obsessing about data in real time, right? Some data points that we collect, we will review on weekly basis, on monthly basis. Some data points we might just do on quarterly basis. Yes, we all have these pictures of real-time fancy dashboards we have. You walk into this amazing room and it has 50 different screens and it tells you everything that happens around the world. I mean, even for major brands where we've built this, you really need this type of real-time access, maybe during Super Bowl, maybe during Black Friday, maybe during some very specific sale days or marketing performance days. You don't really need this information. At 2 p.m. right now, do I really care if I have 50 people on my website or 65?
Absolutely.
It really just does not matter. Just to finish, sorry, I thought the good test for that is basically to ask yourself, can I do something about this information now?
Yeah, big time. Totally agree. And I think that I was going to add on to it too, is to your point of like, hey, slow down on the need to have real time, fella, because I've sat in so many meetings over the years, Michael, where it typically on your revenue side, either on your revenue side or people that really have to focus on your day over day or your week over week climb towards goal typically, but they'll say things like, oh, well, wait a minute, this report doesn't seem to be showing in real time. And you say to them, well, wait a minute. If this was in real time, what does it matter? If you're exponentially off goal anyway, and you're aiming at 80% instead of 100%, what is having real time visibility? Is that really truly going to make that 20% up? And you hear this argument constantly, but couldn't agree with you more. Where as long as you have a reasonable cadence and that's going to meet the organizational expectation for when they're going to get that information or get that updated view or get that updated report. Maybe it's every Monday, maybe it's every day, every morning at 9 a.m. But the point is, those data cuts and views are there for giving you a directional compass anyway. All the other stuff still comes down to the day-to-day actions, the day-to-day activities, getting into the weeds with customers, getting into the weeds in your industry and understanding how to really truly be giving the best possible product or the best possible service. Those are still the most important things. So I'm happy that you're calling out that constant yearning for the real time. Yeah, okay, it's good. It's helpful. It's nice to know that you're looking at but it's again, it's to give you a directional drumbeat to follow. That's really what it's about.
Absolutely. And any great analyst will tell you that their role in many ways, or one of their roles, is to determine what is noise.
Yeah.
And what are the things that you really should be paying attention to, right? Because there is the number of metrics and KPIs is endless, right? If you look at something as Google Analytics, right? I mean, there are pages, there are bounce rate, time on the website, whatever that is. And the question is, well, is time on the website of 2 minutes good or bad? Well, I don't know. Are people looking at your content? Are people going through your checkout page? Well, if
Yep.
people are going
Yep.
through your checkout page and it's taking them a couple of minutes, maybe that's not great, right? So you have to really determine what information I should be looking at and the right type of context. And some other information maybe just is not as relevant, especially if you have a very limited amount of time to act on data. You have to determine what information you can turn into value and
Yep.
what information is just there.
Yep. Yep. No, well said, sir. Well said. So, Michael, as we get ready to wind down the episode, I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to let the CX Nation know where can they find out a little bit more about you, Michael, and where can they find out more about your book, and where can they find out a little bit more about InfoTrust?
Sure, appreciate you asking. So InfoTrust.com is probably the easiest way for everyone to find it. And on InfoTrust.com, there is a Crawl, Walk, Run book. You can also find book on Amazon.com just by searching Crawl, Walk, Run. It should be pretty easy to find. And my information, I'm on LinkedIn, which is easy to find, and also on my website, company website, InfoTrust.com, you'll be able to easily find me.
Fantastic. Well, look, Michael, thank you so much for joining the show. This was an
My
absolute pleasure. And honestly, lots of great wisdom and lots of great ideas. And again, for the listeners out there, if you haven't started thinking about what your data strategy for the future is going to look like, now is the time. And if you don't know where to start, then you're going to have to reach out to Mr. Michael and his team. So thank you so much for joining the show. I do appreciate it, sir.
Anytime. Thank you.